Good day, beautiful souls. I'm Dhanishta and I'm an intimacy coach from Mumbai, India. And I'm here to talk you through self pleasure as an act of self love. Growing up in a really conservative country like India has taught me a lot about how far the stigmatization and taboo around sexuality and especially women's sexuality can go. I myself have faced quite a few impacts around my sexuality in my childhood, in my adulthood, quite a few things that have gone really deep and been able to create a lot of habits and patterns that are subconscious that I could not control until I gained enough of the tools necessary to be able to control and understand myself. Picture this: you are a hunter in a pre modern civilization where you're living in the forest, you're living off of the land, and you really have to fend for yourself every single day, right? You may have a tribe around you, you may have a small group of people, a small community that you rely on to help you out when things aren't so great, but you're also expected to contribute to them in equal measure. At some point in your journey, as this hunter in this community, you would probably have experienced a lot of pain. Maybe there were times when you got lost, maybe there were times when people in the community were bad to you, they hit you, they hurt you. There may have been so many traumatic experiences, right? What we would call today to be traumatic experiences. But many people in your tribe may have experienced them. And back then, there wasn't what we call therapy now. There wasn't any of these modern interventions that we would use for trauma, for impacts. So, how do you think you would heal? Or do you think you would just spend your whole life living in that trauma, living with that same memory repeating in your head? Now, granted, not everyone is going to experience the trauma in the same way. Even if multiple people were mauled by a bear, not everyone is going to feel the same way about it. Not everyone is going to have those flashbacks. But for those who did, how would that ever change? How would that ever heal? I think there's only two answers possible: love and intimacy. And I don't really think there's a big distinction between these two. I think they're very similar. But the non-physical experience of love, the verbal, the emotional, everything else, the service, right? All of that love, I'm putting into one category. And I'm saying intimacy is slightly separate, slightly different. Because this is so unconscious, this is so physical, there's so much body involved here, that this can be a very different experience of love than that, especially to someone who's had, traumatic impact on their body. So I imagine that our number one way of healing before we had modern healing methods was love. And it only makes sense because even today you can experience it. Even today you'll find yourself healing the trauma, the impact of bullying by finding a community in which you can really feel like yourself. Like this community right here. You'll find that people heal the pain of having an absentee parent by finding other figures, paternal, maternal figures that can really love them, that can really show them what love means. That kind of love. Because once again, we're searching for the unfulfilled desires from our childhood in our relationships. And that's because it's our soul's quest, or maybe it's our DNA's quest, to find that healing through love. And it's almost like an unconscious program that we already know that if we find a love that is deep enough, that is nurturing enough, then we can actually heal a lot of the pain that we've been through. And that's why I think that when we are speaking of self-love, when we are directing that love to ourselves, If we're doing that without self-touch, without self-pleasure, without a really deep sense of self-intimacy, then we're missing out. Then we're only able to love our mind, the different psychic elements within us, the different parts, the different roles we play, the different aspects of our personality. We can love all of that, right? We can stand in front of a mirror and tell ourselves, I love my body. But that's a top-down approach. And it's great. A top-down approach is when you're telling your mind something, and through that, you're letting the love, the emotion of love, set in, coming from the top. So this could be you wearing the clothes that you want, regardless of what people think, because you're starting the love process. Even if there's still some part of you that's saying, no, I'm not fit enough to wear this, you're still doing it anyway. It's the same with self-care activities, whether you're doing your skincare, whether you're eating the right food, whether you're working out. All of that is your top-down approach to self-love. It's the way for you to create love by creating the right thoughts in your head that then create the right feelings. What I'm proposing is a bottom-up approach. A bottom-up approach is just touching yourself, just because you can, and because your body, every single cell on the skin of your body deserves it, deserves loving, caring touch. And that's why I use the word self-pleasure, because pleasure can come from touch anywhere. It isn't limited to your genitals. So what would it be like if you were to experience conscious self-touch, conscious self-pleasurable touch? Experiment with different ways to touch yourself. What feels better? What feels more? What makes you feel more alive? What makes you feel more blissful? What turns you off? What turns you on? It could be the strangest parts of your body. You never know until you've tried. Our body, it carries memories of every single experience we've been through, especially the most impactful ones. So if you're thinking that you're just not the kind of person that likes self-pleasure, or that you've never really been into it, that you don't like porn, whatever that reason is that you're thinking about that may be restricting you from trying any of this, I want you to consider how the body is carrying a memory of certain experiences. So it's important to know that it is most likely not you. So unless you're part of the tiny percentage of the population that is actually asexual, I can guarantee that the desire to not touch yourself, to not pleasure yourself, is coming from some kind of impact. It may not have been a traumatic experience, but it could have just been an impact. And when I say that, I'm talking about your first experiences of touching yourself. We all do this naturally when we're really young. When we're toddlers, we tend to touch ourselves. We tend to explore our bodies with our hands, with our, all of our senses, our eyes. We're very curious. So what experiences did you have at that time? What did people tell you, your parents, your family, people around you? What did they say about your touching yourself? What did they say about God, sin, heaven, hell? All of these ideas that may have impacted that. My challenge to you is to see if all of those beliefs, those ideas that they buried inside you, are living through you. They're living through your body right now. Your body can over time get rid of its desire if it believes that that desire could be dangerous. And what are we told as children? That we'll go to hell because of our desire. So I want you to consider that, and consider how through self-pleasure we could access that stored emotion. So not only can you show yourself love through self-pleasure, through self-intimacy, but you can also access the stored beliefs, ideas, and painful experiences that may be living through your body through self-pleasure. Just like I said about our ancients, pleasure, intimacy, love, this is an alchemical process. This is a process that can transform what we're feeling, what we're experiencing into the highest level. You could be in the worst state, and having a person around you who loves you deeply could completely turn that around. At least for those moments, right? There were moments when I lost a family member, a very close family member who was like a mother to me, and nothing could make me happy. But the one friend that stuck around, that I could still call, and I would call her and I would moan and cry and say all kinds of things. But the few moments that she made me laugh, that she told me how much love she has for me, what she sees in me, how much she appreciates me, in those tiny moments at least, I could forget that I'm in mourning. And with something as deep as grief, if it's possible to transmute that with love, with just a verbal, appreciative love, imagine what's possible with intimacy, with pleasure, with real togetherness, real connectedness. Intimacy and pleasure can give you so much growth, so much alchemy, so much healing. But I think that self-intimacy and self-pleasure takes you to a whole other level, because that is where you get to transmute not just how you relate with another person, but also how you relate with yourself. How much do you give to yourself? What does it mean to give that to yourself? It's definitely an act of self-love to go out there and build your passion, right? It's an act of self-love to build your health. It's an act of self-love to find the kind of partner you want and to draw boundaries with people that you don't want to have around you. But all of that is the kind of self-love that society accepts, right? That's the extent to which you are allowed to love yourself as a member of modern society, as a woman in modern society. What has been shamed, though, is our self-touch, our self-intimacy, our self-pleasure. We've been told that that is the level of self-love that we aren't allowed to access, that is not okay, that is sinful, that is shameful, and that we deserve to be outcasted from society, or outcasted from heaven, or hated, or punished in some way for accessing our pleasure, our desire by ourselves, our own self-touch. If we haven't been given access to that level of self-love, that is where most of our shame and guilt lies. That's where the biggest barriers to our self-love lies. That one pillar is holding up all of our shame, or a lot of it. So we may have pain related to our money, our health, our parents, our families, our relationships, but a lot of that pain shows up in our sexuality. And we see this time and again. We see cases of rich people who've had it all, who have access to anything that they want, who still have extremely dysfunctional sexual relationships. And this is because all of the impact that we are carrying can only be alchemized through sex. And when it isn't alchemized, when it isn't transformed, transmuted into something that is useful for us, it is also stored in its negative form in our body, in our sexual parts, in our sexuality. This is not me saying this. This is Mary Magdalene herself, the lady who helped Christ achieve his enlightenment through intimate practices, through pleasure practices, through transforming and transmuting sexual energy, was Mary Magdalene. And she says in her book, the Magdalene Manuscript, that the body is not an obstacle to the spirit. It is the spirit's vehicle for experiencing love. And this is exactly what she means. It is possible to access the deepest level of love, the deepest level of bliss and pleasure through our body. So why do we reject our bodies so incessantly when we're talking about self-improvement, about spirituality, about transcendence. None of that can happen up here. If it could, then we wouldn't have this body. We have this body because this is our medium to transform. And this is the same idea that they purported in the Egyptian culture under the Isis tradition, in the Chinese culture with the Taoist tradition, in the Indian culture with the Tantric tradition, and countless others. I can't tell you everything because this is the kind of knowledge that has been hidden, it has been deleted, it has been removed from the earth, because this was the kind of wisdom that women held. And when the earth kind of went off the rails and sent women into the dark ages, this is what they deleted about our wisdom. But what we know, the little that we know, is also quite a bit. So from the Isis tradition and the Tantric tradition and the Taoist tradition, this form of spirituality, this form of transcendence, of healing, was led by women because we as women have a special power. Sexuality, sexual energy in general is really powerful. But as women, we are the only ones that can make that, can transform that power into a physical being, right? We transform 2 cells into a whole human being. Isn't that magical? We think of ourselves like we know we're powerful as mothers, but what about before that? What about the fact that our body is prepared to do that at every time? That means it's holding all of that power all the time. It is prepared every single month to transform a few cells into a human being, which means we have that power every single month. We have so much creative energy, so much spiritual power that is going to waste. And why is it going to waste? Because we're sitting here with our shame. Because we allow the shame, society's fear of us having our power, to get in the way of what we can actually achieve. And that's why today my urge is to ask you a few questions for reflection and to present you with a beautiful sensitivity building pleasure practice that is made for you to start creating a sensitive, connected, intimate relationship with yourself that is really going to allow you to access a level of self-love that you've never seen before. The self-love activities that you've been doing are amazing. They're fabulous. But they are only half of the issue. So if you're working with your health, for example, you need to work with your nutrition and your workouts. Right? Your nutrition might be the more top-down process. You're telling yourself you're eating the right things, and then the workouts are the more bottom-up process. The workouts will help you in ways you wouldn't even know. Right? Yes, you're working out because you want to build muscle, you want to lose fat, but some of the stuff that will come from you working out, like your flexibility, like your lung capacity, your sudden energy bursts, that happens because you're working out, you're dedicating yourself to the process, and then you're allowing the results to show up from the bottom to the top. So in the same way, I want to urge you to do both. Reflect on self-intimacy in 2 ways. The first is going to be your top-down process. So first I'm going to give you a few reflection questions. I want you to sit quietly, close your eyes and think about them, and let yourself experience whatever's emerging through that, and write it down, journal on it, or you can come and tell me if you'd like. And then you're going to get an attached PDF of a sensitivity building practice. You will also get a YouTube video in that PDF that will take you through the whole practice, and that's going to be your bottom-up. So I'm going to start with a few reflection questions that I want you to really stop, close your eyes and consider. And you can journal on these. You can pause the video and journal on any of them if you'd like. The first is, what messages did you receive about your body and pleasure growing up? How did your parents react when you first touched yourself, or when they first saw you touch yourself? How did they respond to your curious questions about birth, life, nudity? How did you first find out about intimacy and sex? What was that experience like? Once you have a sense of those messages, you can write them down as they come and then move on to how have these messages impacted your relationship with your body and your sense of self-love? How do you feel about your body, about yourself, about someone else looking at you when you're in bed with them, about purely sexual relationships or love relationships that are also intimate? Is there a way in which these messages might impact your friendships? How do you respond when one of your friends speaks about their intimacy, their relationship in bed, their pleasure? And when you feel like that's complete, then ask yourself, what can you do today to start building a new relationship with yourself, your body, and your intimacy, your desire? Because truly, your desire is the seat of your power. It is the seat of your existence and the source of your direction in life. Your desire is not just a tool for self-love, but it's also the compass in your life. When the foundational desire is dysfunctional, when the compass is pointing in the opposite direction, then as you go higher, you reach the level of relationship, of money. At the level of relationship, you find neediness, difficulty connecting with people, avoidance, anxiety. At the level of money, you find greediness, you're wanting too much, or fearing success, avoiding experiences of responsibility that might be related to money. So working with your desire, working with your pleasure, getting used to feeling pleasure, giving yourself pleasure, is not just self-love, although that's a big part of it. It's also a way for you to be able to connect with your compass that will show you where you really want to go. And that is powerful. The most powerful thing in the world is this feeling that you are powerful. The knowing that regardless of any external markers, regardless of how much money you have in the bank, regardless of how many people you know, you are powerful. I encourage you to embrace self-pleasure and self-intimacy as a form of deep self-devotion, self-love. And I encourage you to take a look at what Tantra, Mary Magdalene and the Isis tradition, the Taoists, what they had to say about women, their sexuality, and their experience of themselves. How deeply related sexuality is to self-pleasure. And if any of this interested you, if you liked what I talked about, and if you'd like to know more about this, or if you already feel connected to the Isis tradition and to everything that I've spoken about so far, then please come to my community here on School. I have a community called the Yoni Union, and it will be linked below in the PDF as well. On my community, you will get access to multiple pleasure practices, multiple breath works, and a whole community of women that are deeply dedicated to creating this life of self-pleasure, of self-intimacy, and of deep power. So if any of that appeals to you, please come join us. We'd love to have you, and I'd love to get to know more about you and to be able to serve you in any way that I can with any of the impacts you may have had, anything that this talk brought up that may have been a bit painful, a bit uncomfortable. Please reach out to me and I'll be able to help you on there. Thank you for spending your valuable time here, and I hope that this has given you something. As my mentor Judy says, I hope these heartbeats mattered.